You know, rivalries are as important to football as the forward pass. The real ones, anyway. Not the ones manufactured to sell jerseys or to convince us that a division has meaning. The ones built on hate. The ones with moments that nobody forgets. Today, we have the Chiefs and the Bills. If you're a little bit older, you really remember the Brady versus Manning years. But if you're of a certain age, nothing hits like the Raiders versus the Steelers. 5 straight playoff meetings, 3 AFC championships in a row, and they weren't just great games. They were as close to a fight as football gets. You know, we tend to throw the word war around too much in sports. This wasn't war, but Raiders-Steelers didn't look like modern football. It looked like a fist fight. Something closer to a medieval duel than a game. Guys like Jack Tatum, George Atkinson, and Jack Lambert weren't just trying to stop you, they were trying to hurt you. And if your star player didn't finish the game, that was part of the job. I'm not going to glorify that era of football or pretend that the sport needs to go back to that level of physicality, but that was the reality of football in the 1970s, and these two teams were as good at it as anybody. And like every great rivalry, roles got assigned. The Raiders didn't just become the villains, they leaned into it. Black and silver, mean and cold, unapologetic. At the center of it was Al Davis, who cultivated that image because it was already in him. It wasn't just hollow branding, that was how he lived.
Just win, baby.
Davis knew how to kick doors down. After college, he went looking for a coaching job, and he would introduce himself as Davis from Syracuse, sliding into interviews off the confusion with George Davis, who had been a star halfback there. He got turned down for a job at Adelphi, went over the athletic director's head to the university president, and by that afternoon, he had a job. No one really knows what happened in that meeting, which honestly makes it feel even more like Al Davis. Then there's one of the great Al Davis stories of all time, the signing of Lance Allworth. Davis was an assistant with the Chargers then. The Raiders had drafted Allworth in the AFL draft, but they had traded his rights to San Diego. The problem was this is pre-merger, and Allworth had also been drafted by the NFL's 49ers. So after the 1962 Sugar Bowl, Davis went down to the field with a contract in his hand and got Allworth to sign it before he could even reach the locker room, while 49ers head coach Red Hickey had to watch from the stands. And Davis built the Raiders on that image. Commitment to excellence sounded noble enough, but the Raiders didn't just want to beat you on the scoreboard, they wanted to beat you up. Kenny Stabler and his crew were known for hard living on and off the field. The Soul Patrol roamed the secondary looking to inflict pain or take the ball away, whichever came first. The Raiders loved the reputation because it made them larger than football. They looked like the problem, and they didn't mind being treated that way. On the other side, you had Pittsburgh. Art Rooney was the opposite kind of football man. He was establishment. He had founded the Steelers and presided over 40 mostly miserable years. Joe Green and Terry Bradshaw both talked openly about how disappointed they were to end up there because everyone knew what the Steelers were back then, losers. But those same men became the foundation of the team that won 4 Super Bowls and turned Pittsburgh into the class of the NFL. So when these two teams finally got put on a collision course, the contrast wrote itself. The Raiders were wild, merciless, and led by a man who would do anything to win. The Steelers were supposed to be something else entirely. They were the lunch pail team, the blue-collar team, the team that worked and endured and did things the right way. At least that was the story. Because the truth is, the Steelers were every bit as hard as the Raiders. In 1976, George Atkinson took out Lynn Swann, not with some clean, violent football hit. He clotheslined him from behind. Chuck Noll was furious. He said, "There's a certain criminal element in every aspect of society. Apparently we have it in the NFL too." That was the high road. Noll standing in the daylight, looking down his nose at the Outlaws. Of course, he had nothing to say about Mel Blount pile-driving Cliff Branch into the turf earlier that same game. In the 1970s, the line between hard-nosed football and criminal behavior got a little fuzzy, and the cracks in the Steelers' reputation ran deeper than one quote and a few dirty hits. Al Davis believed the league protected Pittsburgh. He believed the Raiders got the short end of the stick, and at times he may have had a point. In the 1975 AFC Championship game at Three River Stadium, the turf along the outside of the field was frozen solid. Davis believed the Steelers had done it on purpose and went straight to Commissioner Pete Rozelle. Rozelle's answer was that both teams had to play on it, so what's the problem? The problem, of course, was that Al Davis had built Oakland around speed on the edges while Pittsburgh wanted to drag you into a fistfight in the middle. Frozen ground took the Raiders receivers off the perimeter and forced them back inside, right where the Steelers defensive backs could lean on them all day. And just look at Joe Green, a man whose reputation isn't as clean as Coke wants you to believe. In a 1975 game against Cleveland, Green repeatedly kicked Browns lineman Bob McKay in the groin while McKay was on the ground. Jack Lambert body slammed Cowboy safety Cliff Harris in Super Bowl X after Harris patted Roy Gorella on the helmet. After Noll's criminal element line, Atkinson sued Noll and the Steelers for defamation. During the case, Noll was forced to acknowledge that some of his own players, including Green, Blunt, and Glenn Edwards, had reputations for crossing that line too. Blunt was furious and even threatened to leave the team. The whole thing turned into a circus and hung over the Steelers in 1977. And that's what made the Raiders-Steelers so perfect. The roles were real enough. The Raiders love looking like villains, and the Steelers love being cast as the standard. But both teams played like they were closer to a bar fight than a civics lesson. In 1978, the league finally had to do something about the way Mel Blount manhandled receivers downfield, creating the so-called Mel Blount rule to stop defenders from initiating contact more than 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. Blount played in an era where coverage could turn into hand-to-hand combat downfield, and he took full advantage of that. That's the part people forget about this rivalry when they think of it as outlaws versus order. The Steelers weren't the clean answer to the Raiders. They were just a version of violence the league found easier to live with. Maybe the most damning example of all is the one that Pittsburgh fans hold most sacred: the Immaculate Reception. Even the name itself, it sounds like God came down to punish the Raiders and protect the Steelers, right into the hands of Franco Harris, the son of the city, the centerpiece of the fan club called Franco's Italian Army. It couldn't have been scripted any better. And in a way, it was the perfect beginning. See, 1972 was like the Steelers' origin story. 4 years earlier, they had won 1 game, which was emblematic of their entire early history. That collapse gave them the first overall pick, and they used it on Terry Bradshaw. They pinned the franchise to him, and he struggled with everything: maturity, Chuck Noll, even the city of Pittsburgh. But 1972 was when it finally started to come together, and the moment the Steelers became the Steelers was the Immaculate Reception. For years, the argument's always been the same: did the ball touch the ground? And the truth is, the camera work on that play is unusually awful for the NFL. The angles don't clearly show the ball and the turf, so nobody really knows. But there's another quirk to this play, one that Raiders fans know and everyone else seemed to forgot. The pass was intended for Frenchie Fuqua, and under the 1972 rulebook, if a pass touched one offensive player and then was caught by another offensive player before a defender touched it, the play was dead. It was incomplete. And that's what made the collision between Fuqua and Jack Tatum so important. If the ball went Bradshaw to Fuqua to Franco, it should have been incomplete whether Franco picked it off the ground or not. Franco needed Tatum to have touched it. That means the play hinges on 2 questions, not 1. Did Harris catch it cleanly, and did Tatum touch it before the ball ever got to him? Under the rules at the time, either issue could have killed the play. Referee Fred Swearingen left the field and called NFL supervisor of officials Art McNally from the dugout. Then he came back and he ruled it a touchdown. The Hall of Fame and the Steelers accounts both confirmed that this call happened, but the Raiders had another theory. They believed the league wasn't just sorting out the rule. They believed the call upstairs was about something a bit more practical: whether there was enough security in Three River Stadium to survive reversing the call. Now that's never been proven, and even later accounts frame it as Raiders suspicion rather than established fact. But the fact that people still believe it tells you everything you need to know about how little trust there was between Al Davis, the Raiders, and the league. And from that moment forward, the rivalry expanded to include the NFL itself. Davis came to believe that the league played favorite, and that the Raiders were the team that always got the blade. He accused the NFL of fixing games against Oakland, and even said that the Raiders would have won 5 Super Bowls if the league had played it fair. His hatred for the league only grew. When he tried to move the Raiders from Oakland to Los Angeles, the owners voted him down. So Davis did what Davis always did when the door got shut in his face. He kicked it in. He took the NFL to court with an antitrust lawsuit in typical Al Davis fashion. And that's what made this rivalry bigger than football. It's not just black and silver against black and gold. It's outlaw football against the establishment. Al Davis versus the league. The Raiders against the system they believe was built to protect teams like Pittsburgh. And whether Davis was paranoid, perceptive, or a little of both, he turned that belief into one of the nastiest rivalries the sport's ever seen. You know, I love going back and looking at old stories like this. Not just the stats or the myths, but the mess that's underneath all of it. The story everybody knows is usually only half the story. So if you made it this far, first off, thank you. I really appreciate it. If you like this kind of content, please go ahead and like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. And let me know what you think, because I really love to hear where you land on this one. And if there's another topic you want us to deep dive on, drop a pull up.